Good day, folks. I want to share with you some information regarding fertilizers dependency. The fertilizer dependency in Brazil is related to the fact that Brazil imports almost 95% of nitrogenous fertilizer and potassic fertilizers. We do have a lower dependency on phosphorus fertilizers, but I want to treat first, in the first step, to show in part 1 a study from EPE. EPE is a Brazilian energy agency focused on information and planning. That's the focus. They did not their best regarding fertilizer. I don't know, but they are much more familiarized with oil and biofuels issues, but not really on fertilizers. So let's see what I have to show you, and if you like it, at the end, give us a thumbs up and share with your friends this information. I think you enjoyed this part 1, and thank you for your interest and attention. See you next time. Okay, so we have a study from EPE. EPE is an energy planning agency. It's a governmental agency, and they did, in November this year, a study regarding new urea production plants. And these capacities would reduce significantly the level of fertilizer dependency in Brazil. Dependency on imports. And so they did a simplified cash flow using a reference project. And this reference project is UFN3. That's a plant in Minas Gerais state, a plant which has been constructed. It is under construction for more than 10 years right now. And this new capacity would open a scenario for other four new urea capacities, similar to UFN3. And according to them, the goal of this study is to set a range of international natural gas prices, which would justify the conclusion of such new nitrogen fertilizers plants. So here we are going to see the evolution of this study, the main factors they use and assumptions for these new capacities. So here we see natural gas consumption against urea imports. So in orange here, we see the net imports of urea And in blue, we see the additional natural gas consumption in million cubic meters a day, which would be the consequence of the new capacities for urea. So 10 million cubic meters per day would be added within 10 years to the current approximately 52 million cubic meters that we have as natural gas consumption for the industry in general. So 52 would be 63, something like that, million cubic meters a day. So the reference is the UFN 3, that is in Três Lagoas, Mato Grosso do Sul. I said Minas Gerais, but it's Mato Grosso do Sul. And the ammonia capacity would be 800,000 tons per year. Urea, something like 1,300,000 tons per year. So the natural gas consumption would be 2.2 million cubic meters a day. So if they plant 5, so that's more or less the 10 or 11 million cubic meters a day of additional natural gas consumption. And they use utilization factor of 95%, which I will comment later, and this is a very critical assumption. So here we have the project localization, the capacity it would be added, the products of these new fertilizers plants, the natural gas consumption, and specific consumption in 1,000 cubic meters per ton of natural gas. We see also the level of investment and the level of investment per ton of capacity. So we see the UFN3, which has its construction has been stopped, and then we have UFN4 and 5, which seem today to be completely cancelled. So we are talking about UFN3, and these are again the scenario for capacity expansion, the 5 steps, and we see in blue the UFN3 or a similar project being completed, and the small capacity that we have in Brazil, which is not more than 2 million tons. Okay, so important to see the internal demand or the internal market, and that would rise from 6 to 9 million tons of internal capacity, or something like 7 today to 9 million tons a year. So that's That's another interesting, not critical, because we are still talking about 5 small steps until 2034, and the risk here is to conclude one capacity, which would not really create additional risks for the country. And but the issue is still here, because the success from the past, due to new market share due to the sales, the food agricultural segment acquisition share in the Asian market, China, that is not guaranteed that we will continue to have all these growth in the next 10 years. So there are poor comments in the study regarding this internal demand for food exports towards Asia. And here we are going to see some of the assumptions they used. One of the most critical thing is that they forecast an additional $27 per ton, because a local project would take advantage of freight and storage. That's a strange assumption, because we do have these 7 ports they list here, and you can see the impact of Santos port with a total cost of 58, and they use this average, but the average in that case doesn't seem conservative or even realistic. There are many reasons why it would be possible to import through the other ports, and that means this advantage of $27 should not really be considered at that level. Perhaps just a fraction of that. In that case, I think $42 in average, considering port costs and the freight, would generate $42 of advantage, but this advantage still not really too conservative. There are many reasons why a factor of 50% should be applied in this $42 per ton. $51 is actually too much. Anyways, they have a long-term urea price of $329 and ammonia price at $203 per ton. And these are the last 10 years. I don't see why we should really change that. This is a reference. In that case, I see as a good choice. So the $51 should not be considered an income. This is too much. And then the capital expenditures. In the capital expenditure here, I just see one project which should be used, would be the Eurochem project, with 1.4 million tons of urea capacity. But as we can see, they use UFN3 and IEA projects, but UFN3 actually is the objective of this study. And IEA is another scale, around 60% of the Eurocan scale, or much less than the UFN 3 project as well. So I don't see how we would correctly use $1.7 billion as capital expenditures. I don't see why average should be used here. In that case, it seems that we are lacking engineering. So another issue appeared because they use IARA's references for other ammonia costs, production costs, and other urea production costs. In that case, I found the $46 per ton per ton of urea, but not $29 for ammonia. Actually, I found $39 for ammonia. And then we have here another interesting graph, recent graph from utilization factor of ammonia capacities, of IARA's idle capacities. And also we can see the evolution of the European natural gas, the TTF here. And then we see the capacities around from 75 to 90% or so. And according to my experience in other mills, cement production, not only cement, but other mills like sugar factories, and also some refineries, which I had the chance to briefly work and follow some of the projects. And then we can see that 95% as a utilization factor, it is too much. I mean, there is nothing wrong to, in a daily management basis, as we did in cement, to use all your capacity, possible capacity, something like 90% capacity, in a daily basis management, because it is a demonstration of force, power of your industry. So capacity is always a strategic barrier for new entrants. So the less your utilization factor, you bring more competition to your business. But here we see that IARA faced the last 2 years a huge drop in utilization factor, but which was fully compensated or offset by the natural gas prices. Actually, the return on capital employed of IARA was much higher in the last 2-3 years than before. I don't have the whole history here, but that's some information that I can confirm. And then here a summary of the key issues. As I mentioned, the utilization factor. I have issues regarding the $51 per ton of freight and costs and port costs. I would put here $21. And then we have here the investment, and it's amazing to see that all these mistakes And we are talking about this UFN3 project, which actually is a Petrobras project. And we can see that the mindset is the problem. It would be much more safe if we would have some excellence in engineering, and the project establishing a target of not more than 80% of these costs here. So any investment beyond $1.3 billion here is a critical thing. But there is this culture of references like averages and bad engineering, bad planning in terms of financial planning, and very poor investment in all this intelligence regarding the cost. We can see here that 1.7 billion at a cost of $29 per ton, even considering a drop in cost due to scale, doesn't justify. Then we have here the other parameters of cash flow, mainly again an aggressive estimate of 4 years for commissioning and a schedule of disbursement, capital disbursement of 25% a year, while in general projects like that have at least 4 years and they go to 6 years in average, according to Yara's estimate. So here we see some conclusions here, and they say that the natural gas is the key decision for all simulations. I don't agree. As long as we don't have very aggressive and feasible and studied capital expenditures and the operational costs under a severe scrutiny, we see that the conclusion between $3 to $9 per million BTUs for the natural gas prices might dramatically change if we have less uncertainties. So I can agree that $19, which is today $19, $20 per million BTUs, they are the reality nowadays. But it doesn't mean that this is a long-term situation. Otherwise, demand for fertilizers would also be impacted. I will mention in my conclusions here. And the last conclusion sounds apparently logical. They say that the lower the natural gas costs in the international market, less attractive it is the feasibility of a new plant in Brazil. Okay, that's the idea of internal imports of fertilizers. But when we look to the other markets in which they are manufacturing, like Russia or even China, they produce urea and they have not really, we can see China, for instance, they don't have natural gas. The Russians do, but China not. And China is the largest producer of urea. So I come to my conclusions here. I will start by the last So if we don't understand what are the swing producers, the oligopolies involved on that, and that this is a modeling of uh, game theory, and also it has to do of some strong global competitions and the game of capacities here. So I think the studies has no value at all. So the behavior of all these worldwide capacities will determine the success of a new plant in Brazil. Okay, as I mentioned, from bottom up to top, we see the careful assumptions is careful assumptions are necessary, and they are more sophisticated than what they presented here. The model should be as comprehensive as possible. And third conclusion here, the natural gas offer in different logistics scenarios should be considered. And Brazil is a big, very big continent. And we should have the impacts for these new capacities in terms of internal hubs integration with imports. And this is somehow in another study from the government, the fertilizers national plan, in which they treat the topic of logistics with more detail. So, finalizing with my first conclusion, capital expenditures for me is the most important and the first priority in such kind of projects. So that's it.